Hello, welcome to the first session of the 2021 edition of RICO Symposium, titled A Glimpse of the Future. My name is Yannis Apostolopoulos, and I have the honor to be the CEO of the Specialty Coffee Association. First of all, I would like to take the opportunity to thank you all, delegates, speakers, fellows, and partners for being with us today. It means a lot for the amazing SCA team that puts this symposium together. I would like also to thank our sponsor for this session, Ecotact, for their support. So, it has been more than a year since most of the world realized what a pandemic is and how it can affect people's lives, how disruptive it is. What is interesting to me is how used to numbers we have all become and how far removed from reality those numbers feel. We have lost family members and friends. The pandemic has taken over 3,200,000 of us, and tens of millions are suffering from the effect of COVID long term. COVID-19 rose quickly to become the fourth most prevalent cause of deaths in 2020, which is really astonishing. On the other hand, this pandemic amplified inequalities between the wealthy countries and the poor. Nationalism is again on the rise, driving decisions. We've heard heads of state answer questions on how to vaccinate people in their countries without even acknowledging the need for a global plan that will enable all of humanity to navigate this crisis. This approach and all of its associated consequences only further highlight the need for a collaborative global approach to tackle a global crisis, similar to coffee. The global population is not predicted to have access to a vaccine until 2024. Meanwhile, while wealthy countries are struggling to find more residents who want a vaccine, there are still countries with no access to one. Imagine how this feels to someone living in a country without access. Our friends, farm workers and producers of coffee. Many of us have felt let down by our elected leaders this year. Those that denied the virus is a valid threat, those that tried to serve their constituents with relief measures that weren't adequate or that weren't brave enough to fight corruptions or build systems to truly support people. And like the pandemic, this was too global. But this is not what we want, how we want things to work. Colombians demonstrating over the past weeks against the poverty and inequality that have worsened the lives of millions since COVID-19 pandemic began have met with a powerful crackdown by their government, which has responded to protests with the same militarized police force it often uses against rebel fighters and organized crime. Many coffee producer families have been affected. In addition to the challenges of the escalating effects of climate change with hurricanes in Central South America, which are regions that are hit by the virus mostly. The region's economy shrank by an average 7%. In many places, unemployment, particularly among the young, spiked. We at SCA support the right to protest publicly in Colombia and everywhere. If you're doing business with Colombian partners, I urge you to honor your contracts. I urge you also to be flexible, keep up communication, inform yourselves while keeping in mind that what you see from an outside perspective might be a sliver of the whole complex situation. The pandemic is disproportionately hurting millions of low-wage workers in service sector who often lack labor protection and work in close physical proximity to others. Absent adequate income support, many will fall into poverty, even in most developed economies, worsening already high levels of income inequality. The effect of school closures could make the educational divide more pronounced, with possible long-term consequences. Developing countries, particularly those dependent on commodity export, face significantly economic risks. The decline in commodity-related revenues for producing countries due to major disruptions in supply chain like container shortages and blockades, as well as reversal of capital flows due to the aforementioned reasons, all increase the likelihood of debt distress for many commodity-dependent economies. This is amplified by the fact that those exact same economies rely on tourism as well, which has been tremendously affected in 2020. Governments maybe need to be forced to curtail public expenditure at a time when they need to ramp up spending to contain pandemic and support consumption and investment. This pandemic and the economic crisis alongside together will adversely impact sustainable development. Businesses can make an impact. We have been talking about more equitable value distribution, and there is change happening. This is the core of SCA's Sustainable Specialty Coffee agenda for the following years. Boardrooms are changing. Investors focus on environmental, social, and corporate governance, or ESG investors, are pushing for positive change. New governance models that distribute decision-making power along the value chain are on the rise. We need to act for increased access to knowledge for disadvantaged and disfranchised groups and pursue the redistribution of risk. Sustainability is not on the periphery anymore. It's actually driving and adding value to stakeholders. I was intrigued by the removal of Emmanuel Faburin, the CEO of Danone, the global food corporation based in Paris, in the middle of March, as he has been a strong advocate for environmental matters, a more sustainable way of doing business. He came under pressure as sales and growth margin underperformed some rivals in the recent years, showing that he is a victim of this fight. The new way executive needs to do business by pushing for change and the past. Finally, we need to explore finance and ownership models that reimagine how value is created, measured, and rewarded in pursuit of equity. Yannis, Associate Professor of Strategy and Entrepreneurship at London Business School, is a global expert on how companies strategically integrate environmental, social, and governance (ESG) factors into their processes, their structure, and how investment community perceives, evaluate, and reacts to such corporate attempts to integrate ESG, and will be our first speaker today. We, as specialty coffee industry, have been leading the way to trying to make coffee better, meaning fostering a global coffee community to support activities to make coffee a more sustainable, equitable, and thriving activity. Coffee is an ideal industry to bring more ESG investors and investment thinking. One of the positive outcomes of this pandemic is the increased trust of people to scientists and awareness on climate change. Hopefully, we will do so in other major issues we will be facing as humanity in the future. Climate change is a huge challenge and can be more disruptive for all of us than the pandemic. Coffee producers are already feeling the early effects of this. Coffee and other parts of the food systems are dealing with the impacts of climate change every day. Dr. Selina Ahmed, Associate Professor and Principal Investigator for the Food and Health Lab at Montana State University, focuses on three topics: 1. Sustainable agriculture, biodiversity, crop quality, and climate change. Number 2, food environments, food security, and sustainable diets. And number 3, building capacity for future food system leaders. Dr. Ahmed will be our second speaker on this session, sharing some of the findings from recent review of studies on climate change and coffee quality to help us understand what we know and where we need further research. So with innovations in science, what does this mean for us, the specialty coffee industry? Is it just the quality of the cup? Specialty coffee has for many years been based on vocal knowledge, and we at SCA have been pushing for scientific-based knowledge over the last years. What we value in coffee, it's much more than taste, not only monetary. We can make an impact when we get consumers to push the industry. Coffee drinking trends are slowly shifting, and specialty coffee is increasingly become a more conscious choice amongst consumers. The more people, businesses, and stakeholders realize what makes coffee better, the bigger impact we can make. The SCA recently came to an agreement to support the US National Coffee Association's coffee drinking trends, the longest consumer study on coffee as it goes back to the 50s. As part of this agreement, we are gathering data for specialty coffee, and in the future, we will be able to analyze trends and understand consumer and specialty coffee better. Bill Murray, President and CEO of the US National Coffee Association, will be our last speaker on the first session, presenting key data on the survey and give us an in-depth analysis. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Bill for his leadership to make this agreement happen. The SCA and the SCA will be providing a focused specialty coffee report for free, and you, as RIC entities, will receive one. I strongly urge you to read the data and actually invest in buying full access to the national coffee drinking trends from the SCA. Dr. Ioannou will be our first speaker. Yannis has pre-recorded his talk and won't be able to join us for Q&A today as he's teaching a class. Dr. Selina Ahmed will be presenting next, followed by Bill Murray, and I will join them for respective Q&A sessions at the end of each talk. Please enjoy.